depression is such a problem in our country lately. And I think most of the time it's because of money issues, work stresses, and like now the petrol went up, but the salaries remain constant. What do we do with such things, you know? So those are the things that gets people really depressed.
This year I was depressed. The time I felt psychology, I just went so depressed, and it's like, I told everyone I'm so depressed, and then I couldn't get help. But the time I went for studying again, I was like, you know what, depression, go to hell.
There's certain things that you must go for if you are depressed. You know, there's classes and there's things that the government introduces for people that are going through the same thing, so that people go out and seek for help through what they're going through at that certain moment.
I have been depressed before, and then I was using alcohol most of the time, Mara. Then I got a class that deal with emotional intelligence, and then they show me how to handle the depression, and then they give me how the methods on how you're going to handle that depression.
You take time out for yourself and you do the things that you like. So if you like drawing or you have a hobby, then you try and do that so that you can just shy away from whatever it is that makes you depressed.
According to the World Health Organization, an estimated 300 million people are affected by depression globally. Now, depression is a common mental disorder and one of the main causes of disability worldwide. Now, more women are affected than men, we're told. The burden of mental disorders continues to grow with significant impact on health and major social, human rights, and economic consequences in all countries of the world. In South Africa, depression is reported to cost more than 232 billion rands, or 5.7% of the country's GDP, due to lost productivity, either due to absence from work or attending work while unwell, better known as presenteeism. Now, many people don't ask for help because of the stigma associated with mental disorders. So our topic today is depression. And to help us unpack this, we have a panel comprised of a clinical psychologist, a Lincoln Park ambassador, and we'll know more about what that means, a depression activist, a spokesperson for pharmacodynamics, and someone who suffered from postnatal depression to share her story with us. Now, be part of the show by asking some questions or simply just sharing your views with us. The number to call in that instance is Johannesburg 714-6918 or 6919. You can also tweet us at SABC Health Talk or simply just interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. Now, simply relax. We invite you to sit back, relax, and learn from this bumper show ahead. Coming to you just after a short break. I'm Dr. Solomon Daung, and this is Health Talk.
I remember when there was a serious challenge in KwaZulu-Natal with regard to violence that was raging there. Being from KwaZulu-Natal at the time, and concerned about, well, as young people, our views were somewhat a bit radical when we wondered as to what it is that our leadership was thinking in handling that violence, and some of the propositions on engagement in dialogue with what we perceived as our opponents. Must say that Mandela's leadership, and with those he was working with at the time as his comrades in leadership, was very instructive, because they made us to move away from our narrow perspectives of what was the challenge at the time, but rather to look at the bigger picture.
We don't want any death. All traditional places must be centers to govern and administer initiatives.
The agenda is to collapse what was once the leading electricity producer in the whole world.
I'm still waiting for him to go lay charges against anybody.
I have.
And that's what
I've never been depressed before.
Depression, I can say it depends, because when you get depressed now, you won't say I will deal with it a certain way. It depends on how you are depressed. But most of the time when I'm depressed, I pray, I'll play a lot of music so that the stress level goes down.
I've been depressed before. Yeah, I must say it's the most traumatic thing ever, hey? Because I knew from the first time that, no, man, I've been going through a rough space. So I was like, I know what, let me just talk to someone about my personal circumstances and all this kind of stuff.
Bipolar, I've heard that bipolar people are like people who are depressed, usually. People who have stress or something like that.
I always observe someone who had that problem. When the bipolar went up, like, she will just, go like crazy.
Mood swings. You have, then you have your up days, your down days, and some days you just don't feel like doing anything. So it's basically mood swings.
Bipolar, I know it's a condition. Alone, it can be manageable if you take treatment.
All right, so is it mood swings? Is it bipolar? Obviously, there's a wide range of mental disorders that include conditions such as bipolar. But for today, we're going to be talking about depression. And let's learn more about this. And it's a great pleasure to introduce our special guest. First up is Anele Siswana, who's a clinical psychologist. Welcome to Health Talks, Anele.
Good morning, Doc.
All right. Great. So Anele is in private practice here in Johannesburg and is also lecturer in clinical psychology at the University of Johannesburg. And then joining us from our studio in Cape Town is Nicole Jennings, who's spokesperson for Pharmadynamics. And she's no stranger to our show. Welcome to Health Talk, Jenny.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So we're going to come back to Cape Town just now. And, of course, there's a bit of a lag, a few seconds there. But let's come back to you, Anele, and talk about depression. I mean, clearly we're talking here about a psychiatric condition called depression. Let's start with the basics now. People in the clip, referred to mood swings, and sometimes I feel depressed. Let's just clarify this. What are we talking about when you say major depression?
So major depression is deemed as one of what we call clinical depression or common disorders in that way. So what we mean by that? We mean that there's a big difference between a common stress, as you had on the clips that people will be talking about, I'm stressed, I'm feeling depressed in a way. But clinical depression in its sense, psychiatrically, as a form of a disorder, it becomes a problem when it impacts your functionality. The appropriate word would be say it causes impairment in your normal day-to-day activities. Like we've heard, at work it will impact you in a sense that you will not be able to do your work effectively as one would be able to do so. One's productivity will be impacted because most of the times one would be tired, one would be fatigued. So the distinction between the two, common stress, you can function normally or you can do your normal day-to-day activities.
Right.
But with significant clinical depression, it causes an inability to do your normal day-to-day activities. And the symptomology would then dictate and tell us the kind of picture that we would expect from a clinical understanding of what depression is.
Okay. So clearly, I mean, depression has a major impact, and we're going to talk about that later. But let's just clear this one other notion, grief. Now, how does grief differ from depression?
Grief is a normal response to any form of loss. It becomes kind of intertwined in a sense that when that grief is elongated over a course of a long period, then that grief, it causes again impairment. So one can have grief normally as a result of loss or a significant event that happened, and the response will be normal. But then now you can have grief as part of a depressive episode when one is really depressed as a result of a loss or something that has happened. Then the presentation will be quite evident compared to normal grief.
Okay. So there's various types of depression, we're told.
Yes.
One of them, we're told, is postnatal depression. Just take us through basically just different types of depression.
There's a kind of depression called dysthymia, which is a kind of depression that it will be over a period of 2 years or more than that. The presentation will be quite more severe in the sense that in that period of 2 years, one would have some episodes which are indicative of an extreme sense of feeling depressed over a course of 2 years or more than that. And the kind of diagnosis that comes with dysthymia, it's not as clear-cut because there has to be a number of episodes that are clear and evident for one to come to that diagnosis, which is a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist will then be able to determine that kind of diagnosis. Right. At the same time, with what you described with postnatal depression, one would have that over a course of 2 weeks normally, which is one after birth would have some kind of an episode which is suggestive with depressive symptoms. But if it goes beyond that, it then warrants for another kind of a particular kind of diagnosis, which again a psychiatrist and a psychologist are able to work around the diagnostic implications around that.
All right. Let's move over to Cape Town and speak to Nicole. Now, Nicole, we're told that depression is as common as up to 30%. Well, some people say that we have a 30% chance in a lifetime to suffer from depression. How common is depression?
Yes, depression is it's a very common condition, and looking a bit at the postnatal depression, like you've just mentioned, statistics show, a study done by the World Health Organization shows that lower income communities are at particular risk for developing these types of depression. This study found that generally in lower income communities, about 20% of women suffer with the postnatal depression. But in South Africa, we see that up to 40% of women suffer from postnatal depression. And contributing factors here could likely be the high incidence of poverty, the high incidence of intimate partner abuse that we also see in South Africa. The most recent report by the South African Police Service actually indicated that 1 in 5 females in the country experience intimate partner abuse. So this is also a major contributing factor that can bring about an episode in people that are genetically inclined towards postnatal depression.
So what is the clinical course generally of somebody that suffers from depression? I mean, do they go through periods where they get better and they get, come back again? And, what's the prognosis for somebody who's been diagnosed with depression, do you know?
Yes, so for someone who's been diagnosed with depression, what will generally happen is they would have to go to a healthcare professional who will be able to render a diagnosis. But unfortunately, what often happens is these people are unable to access the help that they need. And the reason for this is the stigmatization of depression and the fact that in lower income communities, where people are particularly at risk, there isn't generally that knowledge about these mental health conditions, and people don't take it seriously. So what we also always advise people to do is to take a family member or your support structure with you when you go to visit your healthcare professional, because sometimes the penny just drops in people that don't really recognize this as a serious ailment when they see or they hear that healthcare professional break it down for them and explain the physical implications of depression in terms of, in some cases there are chemical imbalances in the brain, there could be an unbalance of hormones in the body. There are various different elements that could bring about an episode of depression.
All right. I mean, obviously, we're going to get to the causes and risk factors and so on. But just very quickly in the last 30 seconds, the question of awareness that you alluded to earlier, I mean, is quite important. And what are you doing in your organization to raise awareness on mental disorders in particular?
So Pharmacodynamics is a provider of mental health medication. So we do a lot of work to destigmatize the use of medication in the treatment of depression. we do see oftentimes women and men, people that suffer with depression, view it as a failure when they need to take medication to help them cope with this condition. But the reality is, if you consider a condition like high blood pressure, one wouldn't feel like a failure for needing medication to cope with high blood pressure. And it really is very similar with mental health medications. So we've also made a platform available. It's called Let's Talk, and the URL to access this platform is letstalkmh.co.za. And here we've got a wide variety of literature by psychiatrists available that people can access, and it'll just unpack the different mental health conditions a bit. And we've also created a space there where people that suffer with mental health conditions can share their story and access a community of people that have gone through something similar, just to start a conversation and for us to start talking about mental health disorders, to destigmatize these conditions in South Africa.
Very, very important indeed. Okay. It is on this note that we're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our story on depression, and this time look at some of the risk factors and causes for depression, and perhaps hear some stories from some people that are doing some work in depression. Please stay with us.
They've wasted our time, they've made our members to go on strike, they've made the public to suffer for nothing.
Andikwazi ukutya i-treatment ngendlela ngenxa into yoba imali ayikho. Ndifumene i-600 xa ndiphinda futhi ndidrawa ayiphumi ayikho kwakwi-account.
What we are experiencing now is due to the number of people accessing the system at the same time. So if they can just be patient for 3 to 4 days.
We hated the apartheid regime. We didn't want to have anything to do with them. But our brains said, if you don't talk to these people, this country is going to go up in smoke.
How safe is social media? 25 years into democracy and we're still battling with apartheid. Are we really the so-called rainbow nation?
If you can go there, they will beat us something or chase us away. Kill you also. Or kill you.
Not forgetting the dangers of substance abuse.
When he brought those things and came to us, they were looking so tasty with crushed lemons and strawberry and colorful straws.
Importance of education for all.
Yes,
Is the judiciary and government failing the people of South Africa? These are some of our stories on Cutting Edge. Catch it every Sunday at 5:30.
So ultramarathon runner Zanele Hlachwayo lost her father to suicide. Now, struggles of her father and others have inspired her to run 18 races between January and July 2018. This to raise 180,000 rands and create awareness about depression and suicide. Take a look at this.
Running. I run 4 to 5 times a week. I started running 4 years ago in my neighborhood, and I soon realized that running alleviated the stress and anxiety that I had consumed in my life. More so, it made me realize how strong I am. Running or training for a marathon is not easy, but the glory of the finish line surpasses the pain I feel because I always win when I complete a training session. I lost my dad in 2008. He was my pillar, my strength. Papa was my hero. June 16 has never been the same since 2008. For me, it was a day where a part of me left with him. There was nothing to celebrate because my hero had killed himself. I didn't know what to deal with first, the fact that he died or how he died. It was a double-edged sword. The stigma attached to depression and suicide left me feeling alone in the darkest hour of my life. Dealing with the fact that my dad killed himself was prolonged because I couldn't speak about it. It was too painful to speak about it, especially at home. I decided to rise up and do something, not just for myself and my family, but for you. Yes, we are ashamed of depression and suicide in our society, but that needs to stop. Starting on January, I'll be running 18 races and raising funds and awareness about this initiative. My 18th race, which is 160 kilometers, will take place on the 27th of July 2018. Rise up for yourself, for a father, a sister, a neighbor, and follow my running journey as I raise funds to fight against depression and suicide.
Very inspiring indeed. Let's see if we can get hold of Zanele, because she was meant to be with us in studio, but because of other commitments, she gracefully agreed to speak to us on the line. Can we have Zanele on the line? Zanele, hello and welcome to Health Talk.
Hi, how are you?
Great to have you, and very inspiring clip, I must say. Let's first start talking about, what motivated you. Obviously, you shared, your story around your father. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about that, around your father issue? What actually happened there?
Sure. So my father just suffered from severe depression, which subsequently led to his suicide. And as you can imagine, it was a very difficult situation to deal with at home, especially in the Black community. Depression or suicide is something that we don't speak about. More so, men don't speak about depression because it's regarded as weak. So I think because of the fact that my father didn't get the right support and we didn't know how to support him at the time, we really didn't give them that support, which subsequently led to suicide.
So how did that affect you then? I mean, let's just get it clear. Did you yourself suffer from depression, or did you just go through normal grief, as was explained earlier?
No, I think obviously it affected me because I was very close to my father. I'm what they call the standard daddy's girl. And at the time when my father passed, we were actually planning my honors graduation party. And it affected not only me, but my siblings who were much younger at the time. And it was a very difficult thing to deal with, purely because we couldn't speak about it at home. I didn't speak about it because of the shame and the label that comes with losing someone through suicide or having a parent that suffers from depression.
Mm-hmm. And what are you hoping to achieve from your campaigns? You've embarked on a running career, which is quite good, I must say. If anything else, running is a form of regular physical activity, which is healthy, and of course has some impact in fact, prevention of depression, as we'll learn a bit later. But tell us about what you're aiming to achieve from your project.
So I started running after losing my father because I got tired of sitting at home thinking about it and crying to myself. And my father was a very active person. He actually used to run as well. So I don't know. I guess that day I just got tired of just sitting at home and feeling sorry for myself, and I started running. And from the running, I realized that it's something that's making me feel strong. It's something that makes me feel better, irrespective of what was happening at the time. So with the project, I'm basically using my passion to raise the awareness. It's more so about the awareness and really trying to demystify what depression is about, what mental illness is about, and really trying to educate South Africans that they should learn to, support people that may suffer from depression, because more so than not, there's actually more people that are suffering than we don't know. I'm raising funds for SADC at the moment, and in the conversations that I have with them, they do mention that they receive, I think, about 400 calls on a daily basis. And in South Africa, 23 people commit suicide daily. So today, when we go to bed, there's going to be 23 people who have committed suicide. And those numbers are alarming, and I'm just doing my bit to really make sure that someone out there does not get to a point where they lose their lives or they take their lives, but they are able to get be informed about the support that is available in the form of SADC, and in the form of really our circles and empowering people to be able to know how to support someone that may be suffering from depression.
All right. Just the last question before we let you go. Your project is #Run18. What happens after your 18th race?
I definitely need to take a break because I've been running so much. I need a break, but definitely it will continue after my last race. It's actually Rise 18. So after the 18th race, it will definitely continue because I do a lot of talks as well, and really do some motivational speaking as well. So after the race, it will definitely continue because I don't think I've even scratched the surface. There's still so much that needs to be done. People are suffering out there, and people don't even know how to deal with it. So it's my duty to make sure that, and the legacy that I want to leave behind, that I've actually done something for other people.
All right. Well, Zanele Hlatshwayo, Depression Ambassadors, thank you so much for talking to us, and all the best for your future races and the project going ahead. Let's come back to your studio and speak to Anele. Anele, here we're talking about, I mean, we've had that highly inspiring story from, Zanele. We'll get back to just how stuff like this can help, in the prevention of, depression. But for now, let's try and understand the causes of who's at risk of suffering from a depression. Earlier in my introduction, I said it appears that women suffer, from depression more than men. Why is that?
One of the things that we don't speak about as one of the potential factors to consider is genetic predisposition. That some people are genetically prone to depression, which you don't cause that. It's a biological thing, that it's a genetic predisposition that your family seems to or has to happen.
So essentially, if your parents, or one of them, suffer from depression, you're at
risk of developing
getting depression yourself.
And one of the things that have been constantly been mentioned, that in South Africa we live in a very high state where there are psychosocial problems that relate to unemployment, that relate to difficult social circumstances, which also contribute to the rate of people having depression. And you can imagine being unemployed, that means that you don't have money, you can't afford the lifestyle, even the basic things of functioning on a day-to-day kind of way. And there's a whole range of other psychosocial problems that relate to family problems, that relate to personal problems, that relate to work problems, which then contribute to...
Before we come to work problems, because I'd like us to spend a minute or two on that. Let's talk about relationships and family, typical relationship or family type stresses that may lead to depression.
I must say, even in my practice, one of the most common things that I'm getting at the moment is people having relationship dynamics in the context of intimate relationships. That some of those strains and stresses that people experience as a result of financial problems, as a result of intimacy problems, and many other problems that are around stresses, which then again, a stressor is anything that disturbs the normal functioning. It does contribute to one's level of feeling depressed or being depressed. And in a family context where there are constant family dynamics and problems that are unresolved, that also contributes to some family members getting depressed. And all of those factors, psychosocial factors, genetic predisposition, chemical imbalances, and many other variations around that contribute to risk factors and the reasons why people get depressed in the end.
Okay, let's move to the workplace. I mean, a lot of people spend most of their time actually at the workplace, and there are common things there that may lead to depression. We're not talking, I suppose we can talk about stress that ultimately leads to depression. Just take us through some of those.
I suppose because work is, as you mentioned, that it's the most space where people spend their time. If one, you don't enjoy your job, it will lead to what we call work disengagement. Then you can then imagine the kind of emotions and psychological state that one goes through having to go to work and do something that you do not like. And then later you would then experience people not coming to work because they do not enjoy what they do. And also work, especially if your work does not give you the kind of fulfillment that you need, at the same time the fulfillment that you need that goes beyond the internal satisfaction. It's even worse when your job is not paying you the kind of amount that you want or the salary that you need or that you deserve. At the same time, even if you have that salary but you cannot afford the things that you want to manage with your salary. So the work context becomes a potential trigger and a precipitating factor that would then also facilitate the likelihood of one being depressed, especially if there's work dissatisfaction, work disengagement, and many other variations that then causes one not to be able to be productive at work.
Is there anything like people that are that have low levels of resistance to stress? In other words, people that are not able to cope with stress?
Yeah, there are. That's why we have people who then get admitted in psychiatric clinics and in other institutions of mental health. Not that they're weak, but because they've reached a threshold where they can manage and cope with that. And so when we don't have internal resources and what I believe in resilience, so if you don't have that internal power within you that counteracts that level of difficulty and that finding meaning out of what is going on, it's likely that one would reach that threshold and be unable to cope with depression. But if then one has internal resources and the capacity to resist against these difficult psychosocial problems, in the end one is able to navigate that. But if you don't have that, it's very difficult to cope and manage with depression.
Okay. In the next segment, I'm going to ask you about how we can increase or improve on those resources, in talking about prevention. That after a quick break. Please stay with us.
One's life can change in an instant. It is then that you need fast and efficient service, and that is why Asupol created the Instant Groceries benefit for you. Minutes after a claim, an electronic voucher for 2,500 Rand will be sent to your cell phone, and within an instant you can start doing shopping at all the major stores. More than 700,000 customers have already received the Instant Groceries benefit. Get yours in an instant. SMS call to 32813.
During the last 27 years, I have looked keenly to this day, the day when I would come back to an area which I regard as my home, to meet my brothers and sisters, my children, my grandchildren. Today, my return to Soweto fills my heart with joy.
Technology is used for both positive and negative.
Some governments block the internet in times of protest.
With this internet blackout, it's impossible for me to do it, so I have to travel to Douala.
This act is a true violation of the rights of citizens.
In Africa, people are always coming up with innovative ways to use technology to solve some of their problems.
The more interesting piece of technology is actually the artificial intelligence.
AI, it's utilizing data to make your life easier.
Our network will give you Africa's technology and social media news.
Catch Network with Spumelele Zondi every Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back. We're talking major depression with my guest here in Johannesburg, Panelists Iswana, who's a clinical psychologist in private practice in Johannesburg and also lecturer at University of Johannesburg. And we're now joined in our Cape Town studio by Maritza Holiday. Maritza is a lady that suffered from postnatal depression, and she's going to share her story with us. But Maritza, I'm going to come back to you just now. Let's first take up, we have two callers on the line. We'll take them one after the other. The first is Tembi from Cape Town. Tembi, welcome to Health Talk.
Hey, how are you, sir?
We're good. How are you, Tembi?
I'm fine, thank you. I would like to know, because I'm currently in a situation where I can't really tell whether it's depression or anxiety, where you just deeply disturbed and hurt emotionally to the extent that you feel powerless and you even lose appetite and you lose focus on everything, and then it leads to sleepless nights that you just toss and turn throughout the night. And you just lose complete interest on everything, actually. So I want to know, at what stage does one now realize that you are really hit hard by depression or it's anxiety? Because we tend to take these things for granted, and we'll just think, oh, I'll snap out of it, or it'll pass as time goes on. But it just never passes. It just goes on and on and on and on, and then you keep suffering physically and mentally.
Okay, excellent question. Thank you so much, Tembi. We'll get our psychologist to take us through that. But before that, let's take Mrs. Jones from Port Elizabeth. Mrs. Jones, welcome to Health Talk. Mrs. Jones, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, are you there? Do you have her? No. Seems to be a problem on the line. So here's somebody with, a set of symptoms. She's not sure whether it's anxiety or she's at the point where she needs to go and consult, essentially. Your advice?
The first point, essentially, is to consult. Right. Preferably a clinical psychologist first, and then a clinical psychologist can then recommend a psychiatrist for medication. I think we'll touch that on when we talk about treatment.
Right.
But the symptomology that seems to suggest, it gives an impression that she may have symptoms that are suggestive of depression.
Depression, okay.
Like with the physical symptoms she has described, and the level of emotional apathy that she's also described as a result of that, sleeping difficulties, all of those kind of symptoms may warrant for a clinical diagnosis of depression. But for that to be clarified, a psychologist would then also help her to understand the possible factors that could have contributed to the way that she's feeling at the moment.
Great stuff. Let's take Mrs. Jones. I believe Mrs. Jones is back with us. Mrs. Jones, welcome to Health Talk.
Okay, Mrs. Joan Russell.
Oh, Mrs. Joan Russell. My apologies.
Yes. Okay. It must have been about 10 years ago. My doctor was going overseas, and my blood pressure was up a bit. So the new doctor started the next day, and I didn't realize that for my blood pressure, he'd changed my tablet. I took that for 6 months with quite a lot of other things, Cipralex, lamotrigine, simvastatin, Urbinol, Zanol, and Effexor, and what's the other goodie? Captamax. After about 6 months, I realized, no, there's something definitely wrong. I've got a happy nature. I'm not depressed. And so this carried on until December. And then eventually, hamster on a cage, in a cage, and just uptight the whole time.
So we lost you a bit there. Let me just understand. You're saying that you had hypertension and you had visiting your doctors on a regular basis for hypertension, but the medication you were given included medication for anxiety and depression. Is that what I'm hearing?
No. My doctor was going away.
Yes.
So then I had to see the doctor in his place.
Yes.
But he changed my blood pressure tablet.
Yes.
The new doctor.
Right.
And within, say, 6 months, December, I remember, I couldn't take it anymore. So I went to the chemist, and then I went back to my my doctor that I normally went to, who'd moved. And he said, I can see immediately what's wrong with you. You have, you have a depression. And so then he said, I also had what he called it, neuron deficiency. Okay, and then so now I'm on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lots of medication.
All right.
And the one I take 25 and 45.
And you're feeling great for the moment?
Some days I have a little bit of a down.
Yeah.
And there's something, I'm sleeping all right because with the last tablet, I have a sleeping tablet. So I'll sleep through the night and things like that.
All right, okay. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Mrs. Russell. I just encourage you to, obviously go back and consult with your doctor and perhaps see whether or not you also can do with seeing a psychologist. Perhaps, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, usually the use of medication and psychotherapy work hand in hand.
Right.
To, again, understand what could be the reasons that warrant for or account for one's anxiety.
Yeah.
Or that warrants for one's level of feeling depressed.
Okay.
So that is very important.
So she seems to be at least on the right track.
On the right track.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Let's go back to our Cape Town studio and, speak to a lady there, Marisa Halliday. Marisa, you said to have had postnatal depression. Please take us through what happened to you.
Hi there, thank you for having me. I actually have bipolar disorder, and that put me at more of a risk to get postnatal depression.
Okay.
And with my first child, that's what happened to me. It was terrible, and to be honest, nobody ever talked about postnatal depression back then, so I never knew that was what was wrong with me, and I felt guilty sharing it with people because surely, you have this new baby, you should be happy and everything should be perfect. So I felt extremely guilty and I never talked about it. And then eventually I did reach out. Unfortunately, with the postnatal depression, it also made me struggle to bond with my daughter. And we had to start quite a rocky journey. But with the right support system and medical care, it helped. And I'm so glad to be part of this and work on a platform where we can actually start talking about this and help other mothers experiencing the same thing.
So what did you experience just after your birth, and how long ago was it? So kind of saying, what are those typical symptoms that you experience so that other people, watching can have a sense of, saying, hey, I think she's describing exactly what I'm feeling now.
So the thing that I remember the most vividly is I remember seeing this baby and not bonding with it. It was this stranger almost. And I felt extremely sad and numb at the same time. It's very difficult to explain. There's so much emotion going on inside of you that you can't really single one out. It was hard to get out of bed in the morning. I just had no power to kind of carry on, no energy. I didn't eat. I wasn't sleeping. I had very, very severe insomnia. But at the same time, I couldn't carry on with my day-to-day tasks. And all I focused on was keeping my baby alive and feeding it, and I didn't want to do anything else. I just did what I had to do to get through the day.
Yeah. So, well, we're all glad that at least there was a positive ending to that story, and I can only wish you well. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. On that note, we're going to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we now talk treatment and support for depression. Please stay with us.
we visit all the best spots for some live jazz performances? Traveling to breathtaking holiday destinations is what we like doing. Enjoying outdoor adventures with family and friends. Relish global cuisines.
Part of cooking.
For all the tourism, delicious cuisines and outdoor adventures, join us on Trends Travel every Sunday at 12 o'clock right here on the SABC News channel.
We've now signed. We are part of a growing number of African countries that support a free trade area for our continent. This is going to open up great opportunities for our economy because now the whole of Africa is open for doing business. So we're delighted.
Those among us that are charged with the responsibility of dealing with corruption may please rise and do their job. There is so much corruption in South Africa, especially at the governance level. So much.
As democracy matures, we get into discussing very, very sensitive issues.
I think that there's a lot of people that are applauding it. I'm sure it's going to be appealed.
It is the beginning of a long journey of South Africa fighting racism.
That sticky label of being a white party, so to speak, doesn't seem to want to go away.
So the competition actually helps and it brings out winning in total.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Welcome back. We're talking depression with our guests here in Johannesburg. We have Panelists Swana, who's a clinical psychologist in private practice based in Johannesburg. And we're now joined by another special guest, Sean Muthea. Sean Muthea is a Linkin Park ambassador, and he's going to tell us about what this Linkin Park is about. Welcome to Health Talk,
Yes,
Sean.
Thanks for having me.
First, let's start with you then. What is this Linkin Park?
Okay, so Linkin Park is an American band. And basically, I am the ambassador for South Africa. And I run the Linkin Park South Africa page on Facebook and Twitter, and that is basically used to promote all news related to the band.
Mm-hmm. So what is the link then with depression?
So sadly, their lead singer, Chester Bennington, passed away last year on the 20th of July. Mm. He suffered from mental illness and depression, and this is what caused his death through suicide. Mm. So once this happened, I held 2 memorials last year for Chester, one in Johannesburg and one in Pretoria. And I used that as a platform to raise awareness around mental illness, where I also had a representative from SADC to talk to the fans as well.
So what motivated you particularly to get involved in this? Is it that you love the band that much?
Yes.
Or is it that you were affected by depression at some point in your life?
Chester was one of my idols in music through my late teen years growing up.
Yeah.
And since he suffered from mental illness, which in turn took his life, I felt, let me turn that negative into a positive and try to address that issue in our country through music.
Yeah. So do we know anything around what could have caused the depression in him? Let's not. We'll get to the suicide part, because there's obviously a clear link between suicide and depression.
So with Chester, as far as I know, in his early days, he was sexually abused growing up at a very young age, and his parents divorced, and throughout his life, he suffered from that depression. He was very vocal about it as well. Mm. He never hid the fact that he suffered from depression. Mm. But then again, you look at a superstar like him, you would think, okay, they have perfect lives, nothing can be wrong, but depression doesn't have a face like that. So,
okay. Well, I guess, Anele, this brings another important fact here about depression in childhood going right into adulthood. Your comments on that?
Yeah, we often miss and don't understand that depression can happen in early childhood. And what do I mean by that? One can be depressed as a child. And then later, it manifests in early adulthood, where the manifestation is full-blown kind of a presentation that if during that process of childhood or early development, that depression was never diagnosed appropriately and treated, then later in life it may cause problems and lead one to be significantly depressed in the end. So there's a close link that if during early childhood, those early traumatic experiences, like he's explaining, sexual abuse and many other problems that relate to family dynamics, they are untreated, either with psychotherapy or other models of helping the child to cope with those situations later, that can be a problem in causing one to be really depressed.
Okay. Well, I guess here we're supposed to be talking about treatment. Can we perhaps spend about 30 seconds or so just on prevention? I mean, is it possible to prevent depression? You spoke earlier about those situations that obviously are risk factors for depression.
I'm a fan of primary healthcare prevention, in a sense that we really need to create structures that would limit the potential of people getting depressed, and also promote the idea of people using self-help methods. That could be spirituality, anything that works for you in terms of your religious background, of your faith, as a coping mechanism or as a way of making meaning and sense out of your difficult situation. That could be a self-help method. You can use exercise and many other models that can heighten up one's level and limit the potential of being depressed. And other preventative methods is us teaching people with psychoeducation about what is depression, its symptoms, and what are the early signs, so that one can really identify those so that you can prevent the likelihood of you being significantly depressed. So there's a whole range of other possibilities that people can use as a way of treating, actually preventing.
Well, talk about treating. How is depression treated?
There are two possibilities, either medication or psychotherapy. But from my side as a psychologist, I really encourage people to go for therapy to understand the dynamics behind their depression. And therapy does not only help you to understand that, but it helps you to cope, make meaning, and find a way of navigating and coping with it. And the second one, which is psychiatrists and doctors, we refer to, that they deal with the medication, because we're not trained to deal with medication, but we can refer so that they get the right treatment in terms of medication. And that our role as psychologists will be then to encourage people to remain consistent in taking their treatment, because some people would then complain of the side effects, would complain that it's very difficult to be consistent in taking their medication. And so it becomes very important that when one is prescribed medication, they take it consistently so as to prevent other problems around depression.
Right. Let's go back to Sean. Sean, obviously, you talk about the projects that you've undertook, to raise awareness.
Yes.
And I believe that you have some event upcoming. Tell us about it.
Yes. So with Chester's 1-year death anniversary coming up, I wanted to do something very special for the fans and to continue to raise this awareness. Now, recently, one of their band members did an interview, and speaking about awareness, this is how I would say I relate to what he's saying and how I feel it should be looked at. He basically said mental health is like physical health. For example, let's say you wake up one morning and you realize you have a backache. You would say, okay, maybe I need to take it easy today. And if that backache is much worse, you would say, okay, maybe I should take some medication. And what if it is worse than that? You would need to see a doctor. So mental health, I feel, should be the same way. I mean, it is health after all. And we need to constantly check in with ourselves and ask ourselves those questions. So with the help of two amazing people who are in the music industry themselves, Danny Lombard and Musa Mtambo, we came up with the event called You Matter, a tribute to Chester Bennington. And this event will be taking place on the 21st of July in Sundowners Alberton, Johannesburg. It is a concert event, and we'll be having a few acts performing from Durban and around Gauteng, and they'll be performing out of their own capacity.
Yeah. And the entry fee?
Entry fee will be 50 Rand, gets you in at the door, and 40 Rand if you wear Lincoln Park gear.
Okay, and this is obviously raising funds that will go towards SADC, as you said.
Yes, correct.
Right. Well, I'm sure people saw all the details around it, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all our guests, Panelists Swana, Sean Muthea, and of course we had Nicole Jennings and Zanele Hlajwaya on the line, and yeah, all of them, please, thank you so much. You really make this show a success. And to our viewers at home, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the calls. We see you again next week, same time. And if you've missed any of our previous shows, please remember that you can download them from our YouTube channel. I'm Dr. Solomon Deng. Until then, please do take care.